Welcome to Registered, the podcast of the Catholic Register, where we'll be taking a look at the stories that graced all of our platforms over the past week. I'm Mickey Conlon, editor of the Register. I'm here alongside reporters Luke Mandato and Quinton Amundson. Welcome, guys.
Good morning, Mickey. Thanks for having us on today.
Great to be here for episode 7.
Okay, and episode 7 is brought to you by EWTN, the world's largest religious media network. EWTN is offering free ebooks on the lives of St. Carlo Acutis and St. Pier Giorgio Frassati. Download the free ebooks through EWTN.com. You can also watch powerful documentaries about their lives on EWTN On Demand or through the free EWTN app. Well, we're back to, once again, talking about the Middle East. The Middle East, I think we could probably talk about every week till kingdom come, because there's always going to be something going on there. But of course, we're going to talk about the peace agreement, and we've just brought an end, a cessation, we'll say, to the hostilities for the moment between Israel and Hamas. We've brought the return of the living hostages, the Israeli hostages, some of the deceased, which of course is causing some issues. And in turn, thousands of imprisoned Palestinians have been released. So I guess the biggest thing we're going to have to say here about it's brought people together on the man who's brought this all to fruition, Donald Trump being the key in bringing the peace. So I know we were talking in our production meeting how everyone is pretty well praising Donald Trump.
Typically his critics have rallied around in this moment, recognizing the enormity of this vision. And that's one thing that's been really brought to bear in the last couple of days in the discussions is that Donald Trump had a vision for Middle East peace dating back to 2016. So the fact that he was able to see an enormous breakthrough here 9 days later is a very encouraging sign for him. And he did say when his presidency comes to an end in just over 3 years that he does plan to be involved in a post-presidency to try and ensure this is a lasting peace. Shows that this is something that he's very committed to in the long run.
Yeah, I think you're right too there, Quinton, with that last point. It seems like something that he genuinely cares about, and genuinely has cared about for some time, and appears to be something he wants to care about past even his presidency, right? So as much as he may like to do things for show, this seems like something that's very near and dear to him. And we talked a little bit there about even some people opposed to him or his views giving him props. I had read that some of the Clintons had congratulated him for this deal. Even some of the late night show hosts, Colbert and Kimmel, on air live on their late shows were expressing their gratitude to Donald Trump for his part in this deal, which is, when that happens, that it's pretty serious, right, Mickey?
That must have been pretty painful for both those men.
You could tell they were gritting their teeth reading through the teleprompter. I mean, if they slid in their jokes, of course, but anytime something like that happens, I think it goes to show sort of the scale of what we're dealing with here, right?
Well, we have to go back to even his first presidency, and he's been working behind the scenes for many, many years with the Abraham Accords to bring peace in the Middle East and to bring these different factions, the Jewish populations and the Muslim populations. So it is, hey, this is the fruit of that labor. So, but it does bring us to the one question. It's an area that we know is constantly in conflict. Will we see an end, a true end to conflict in the Middle East? I know we've seen there's been peace deals in the past, maybe not quite as broad as this, but they've always been broken. You see that the UN, the money goes to help Palestinians, and Hamas grabs it, and what do? They arm themselves and they build the tunnels underneath. So, um, are we going to see uh, a lasting peace?
It feels like this is sort of the closest we've been in a while to a lasting peace. You know, I think everyone's kind of gotten so numb over the past 2 years, especially. I mean, obviously way longer before that, but in recent times, these last 2 years of it being sort of this unattainable thing, I think a lot of people have given up on that idea, which is unfortunate. I won't say that I have. I definitely think that there are ways to establish a lasting peace. I think this is a step in the right direction. I mean, it's all going to sort of depend on where we go from here. We've already seen, I think you said at the beginning, Mickey, a bit of tricky instances even now during this peace deal already, and it's been how long? A few days, right? Um,
Yes.
so
Well, and
I think
as you're talking about, that's the dead hostages are supposed to be all returned. Well, it's been a very slow process, and so there's your little trickery. So, which of course has
exactly.
led the Israelis to cut back on how much aid they're allowing into Gaza.
Absolutely. And while I won't say, you can't say for sure whether there will be a lasting peace, one thing I do know for sure is it won't be a sort of a snap finger deal where all of a sudden everything's fine. And because, two parties sign on something, everything goes back to the way it was in what, 1945, around
47.
that 47. I don't think that's the type of lasting peace we're going to be looking at where it's an instant thing. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of sustained work. What do you think, Quinton?
There definitely needs to be will. You're right about that, Luke. But we also have to keep in mind that nobody knows the pattern of the world except our Almighty God. So the best thing we could do, better than to prognosticate, is to pray. That's the greatest utility that we could have in all of our positions, because these things are, not in our control. But we definitely could take heart that so many prayers were answered when living hostages were reunited with their family members. Just the emotion of those moments where people thought, "Oh well, I never thought I'd see my son again. I thought that he was dead," but they were able to embrace, and now they could have a future that is hopefully a lot more peaceful. That's what we take heart in for what we've seen so far, and we have to continue to rely on our God in the future. That's all we could do as believers.
Well, we do have a little bit of precedent here, and I go back to Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Accords when that was signed, and has brought some stability to Northern Ireland, which we've seen in the ensuing years. But if you go right back to when they were signed, uh, there there was lots of people that were wondering, oh, is this going to last? Will this peace last? And thankfully it has. And like I go back to, I've got lots of relatives in Belfast and Derry, and they were skeptical. Will something happen? All it takes is one Yahoo goes up, and back in those days, they were blowing up bars, in the Catholic enclave or in the Protestant enclave. But we've seen that it's held there. So we can only hope that that is going to happen here. What do you really, if I were to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think? Is it going to last there? I'll go to you first, Luke.
On a scale of 1 to 10, if it's going to last at this point in time, I'm still somewhere hovering around a 5 to a 6, I would say. I feel like that's fair. Quinton?
Oh, I just said something about no prognosticating, and now we're doing that. Well, I definitely believe that there is will, so I will say a 7, but it's not in our hands.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say just to be a nice positive guy, I'm going to give it at about an 8 right now. So
Good for you
we'll
too.
see what happens. I'm as you said, Quinton, it's not in our hands. So, but
I mean,
what
the
is
hope
in
is
our
ahead,
hands
right?
as Catholics? And this is something that's certainly gotten lost in the whole shuffle of what's going on in the Mideast. But we have our Pope Leo XIV has released his first apostolic exhortation, Dilexi, and my Latin is absolutely horrible, so I hope I pronounced that properly. So it's been released in the past week, and basically, the Pope has asked us to walk poor with the poor. Well, I think we've heard that from just about every Pope in our lifetime, and probably before that. So, but this one's an interesting one. This was begun by Pope Francis before his untimely death. Yet Pope Leo has taken it on, and he's continued it, and he's come out, he's finished it. And Bishop Goudreau, the Canadian Catholic Bishops Conference president, had an interesting take on that. Quinton, you spoke with Bishop Goudreau. How about you let us know about that?
One of the standout quotes from our conversation is the way that he characterized the document as Pope Francis flavor with Pope Leo's seasoning, because there definitely is a big, strong core of the values that Pope Francis brought to bear in terms of talking about how we need to not only accompany people who are economically poor, but culturally poor, socially poor, and there needs to be a desire for the church to truly see Christ in the homeless and also the migrants and the refugees in our midst. We are called to welcome, we are called to integrate, we are called to protect, and we are called to defend. I mean, just a lot of the language and the talking points of the predecessor of Pope Leo are also being adopted by Pope Leo here. So it did appear to be a very seamless passing of the torch with this document, where so much of the essence of Pope Francis is still very much all over the pages of Dilexi.
Well, that begs the question. Are we just looking at a continuation of Pope Francis with Pope Leo? Now, I know all the popes, they're always talking about peace, walking with the poor, everything along those lines. They've all got a constant theme. But are we seeing, you know, basically Pope Francis point 2.0?
Yeah, I'm not sure it could exactly be, classified as a 2.0. I don't think anyone was really expecting a grand revelation from this as something entirely different. I think it's pretty common to see, like you said, these similar themes brought up. I think it's a good thing. I think it's themes that are important, especially, in our modern time, to continue looking at things like this. So, well, I won't say that it's a continuation identical to that of Pope Francis. I think he's doing a smart thing by sort of continuing this on. He saw that it was working, and I think this letter specifically, this is a direct continuation. I think it was designed to be. So I don't think it's anyone really catching Pope Leo out and saying, this is really similar to the last thing. I think it was intentional on his part, and we're seeing that now as it's been released.
I think it's very important that we note what Bishop Goudreau relayed to me as the kind of the four key contributions that Pope Leo made to this document. I mean, the first thing is he did overlay a big history of various saints and church fathers and clergy who helped with this mission of being a church walking with the poor throughout the millennia. And it's very key that and very telling that he mentioned St. Augustine, because We know that Pope Leo is an Augustinian religious. There is also a heavy citation of a document, the final document of the Fifth General Conference of the Episcopate of Latin America and the Caribbean and Brazil. We know that Pope Leo did, serve in that area in Peru for many years, so he's very much inspired by that part of the world. And we know who was also in part of drafting that final document in Brazil in 2007 during the papacy of Pope Benedict XVI, and that was the future Pope Francis. So, I mean, there's an influence in that way as well. So, I mean, there are quite a few imprints, not only the original text, but he's also drawing on a very key leadership experience of Pope Francis when he was Cardinal Bergoglio at the time.
Yeah, well said, Quinton. And one of the things that my mind sort of goes back to as well when we talk about the imprint of Pope Francis on this current papacy, I look back to just sort of around the time when Pope Leo was installed. The Catholic Register ran a poll for young adults. It was ranged, I think, age 18 to 30, and they were asked what qualities the next pope should exemplify. I think it was 64, almost 64.5%. We're hoping for a compassionate pastoral approach. Things like social justice advocacy and inclusivity were followed very closely at, I think it was 58 and 47.5, respectively. So these sort of, if you want to call them progressive or compassionate approaches as something the faithful want, especially the younger faithful, which is, I think, certainly an area Pope Leo is trying to target as well, intentionally. So just something to think about. It's an approach that we're seeing pretty deliberately.
Well, it is funny, we've, of course, the church is just like any other politics. We get drawn into, oh, he's a conservative, oh, he's a liberal. And, our last four popes we'll look at, tagged as liberals, of course, are Pope Francis and seemingly Pope Leo. But the two immediately before them, you wouldn't have said that. You put them more in the conservative, Pope Benedict and Pope John Paul II. But take a look at their messages, and it's almost, this could have been started not just by Pope Francis, this exhortation. This could have been started by John Paul II. And then Pope Benedict could have seamlessly taken over and moved into there. So it's not as right-left as a lot of people make it out to be in the corridors of power in Vatican City. So,
well said. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, coming back to home, we'll go to the corridors of power here. And Quinton, you've done a story this week on what's the latest happenings in Parliament, actually in the Senate in this case, on a topic that's very near and dear to your heart. For those who don't know, this is about human trafficking. Quinton wrote most of this was back in 2023. We did a special section called Breaking the Bondage, and it was about human trafficking. And it was an award-winning feature that Quinton did a lot of work on exposing human trafficking and just, how Catholics are responding to it. So how about you tell us about Bill S235, that is proposed legislation to crack down on human trafficking.
Yes, thank you very much, Mickey. Indeed, the Register has definitely made it a mission to expose the nature of human trafficking in our country, and it's been very rewarding and enriching to speak to the various organizations that are on the front lines of combating, raising awareness about this scourge. We have to keep in mind, in terms of profitability, it is the second largest criminal enterprise on earth, only succeeded by the drug trade. closer than you know, but these are very sophisticated networks and syndicates and individuals who perpetrate trafficking in our midst. So there needs to be a national strategy to combat human trafficking. We had one from 2019 to 2024, and we have conservative Senator Atula Majen, who has really brought forward a great initiative to try and spur the new Liberal government to kickstart a new national strategy. And I think a few core aspects of this approach that she is advising in her bill is for there to be more of a victim-centered process, empowering survivors to really have their voices heard about what should be done about prevention, trauma care, what needs to be done for the justice system, what reforms could be made to the justice system to give people more confidence to come forward, because you have to keep in mind, less than 10% of Canadians who are victims of human trafficking even feel comfortable going to the police. And there's various factors at play there. So, I mean, there is a big justice system reform that needs to happen. So this bill is trying to call on that. And there also needs to be increased international cooperation. I told you that the global trafficking is unfortunately a very organized mechanism. The anti-trafficking system has to be very organized in its own right. So, I mean, as much as there's a lot of decentralized organizations, this bill was really calling on, okay, what could we do at a global level to be more effective and pack more of a punch to disrupt this evil happening in our midst?
Well, where does Bill S235 stand right now?
Well, it was introduced in the Senate late last month, and we are awaiting second reading. So we are going to have to see exactly when it is debated. And we do know that it does have the support of the various anti-trafficking organizations. I did speak to the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking, and they are very pleased to see that it is highlighting the need to put victims first and to really ensure that survivors are empowered to have their voices heard.
We can only hope that the senator has success with this. Speaking of success, well, we woke up, those of us that stayed up late last night, we saw the wonderful Toronto Blue Jays, the team that we remembered that's beat the hell out of the Yankees, who didn't look like they were the same team through the first two games against the Seattle Mariners in the championship series. Well, they were back, and they smoked them. 13-4, 5 home runs. Everyone was hitting. Oh, it was wonderful to watch. So, but I think it goes a little beyond just the physical aspect, doesn't it, Luke? You spoke this week with noted Toronto Blue Jays fan, the retired Father Terrence McKenna. How about you tell us a little about your conversation with him about the Blue Jays and hopefully their run to the World Series?
Absolutely, Mickey. Yeah, I think hopeful is the right word. And what a game last night. The Bats were definitely back in a big way. Looked definitely more like the team in New York, playing in Seattle last night for sure, which was great. But yes, this was a fun one. I had a great call with Father Terry McKenna, former priest of St. Mary Immaculate Parish up here in Richmond Hill, actually. He's been notable for his love of the sport of baseball and, of course, the hometown Blue Jays for a long time now. We spoke just after their Game 4 win over the New York Yankees. I'd given him a call just to get his thoughts sort of on the Jays' run and just talk a little bit about baseball, the Jays, life and faith and how it all is sort of intertwined. It was a great chat. If anyone reads the story, you can see just how excited he was about that series win over the Yankees. But more so, he was really talking about the ways in which baseball emulates life and emulates the faith, which I thought was particularly interesting. Even just going back really to the history of the Jays, he recalled the time that they had won back-to-back World Series in '92 and '93. He says he was at St. Mary Immaculate when those games were taking place, and he says it's something he'll never forget, is just the excitement of the parishioners and of the city itself and the nearby cities, of course. So that was interesting. And then just sort of the way that he was describing baseball as being a game where there's not always a whole lot of action. There's a lot of waiting. We talked about waiting and waiting for things to be lasting in this podcast. He said that's the same thing with baseball. You have to be ready to make snap decisions, snap moves, be able to make this quick discernment. Something he says sort of echoes the priesthood even, which I thought was clever on his part. Just a great man, and someone very excited to sort of see how this series goes. Of course, first two games were nothing to talk about, especially as Jays fans, but he will be hoping for more of the same. He says he still follows the team, prefers the radio broadcast to the television, but it's something he'll be watching and keeping the spiritual aspect of it in his mind, probably at the forefront of his mind, even over the physical baseball being played. But yeah, Father Terry will be watching for sure.
Okay, and most of us will, though I'm not sure if Quinton is, because Quinton's more of the Leaf fan. But,
Indeed, I am happy that the other Toronto team is playing, but I definitely know that it is exciting what is happening for sure. And there's going to be, I'm in Alberta, and I know that a lot of Blue Jays fans from my area, not surprised that they went down to Seattle to witness that big win in person. And I will sure they'll be equally boisterous tonight. We're recording it on October 16th, and they're no doubt looking for a series tie going into Game 5.
Yes, and we pray for a lot of things, and that's one of them we're going to pray for at this time of year. So, okay, well, thanks, guys, because that's going to bring this episode of Registered to a close. I'd like to thank you for joining us. Thanks to Quinton. Thanks to Luke. And I hope you can join us next week for Registered. Meanwhile, for all your Catholic news, be sure to stay informed at catholicregistered.org. And again, a big shout out to our sponsor this week, EWTN, the world's largest religious media network. EWTN is offering free ebooks on the lives of St. Carlo Acutis and St. Pier Giorgio Frassati. Download the free ebooks through EWTN.com. You can also watch powerful documentaries about their lives on EWTN On Demand or through the free EWTN app. Again, thanks very much for tuning in.